Steve Prince, and I'm a visual artist, born and raised here in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I went to Xavier University of Louisiana for undergrad and Michigan State for grad school. I'm up here just to share with you just a little bit of information in reference to the banners that I created in connection to the project called Crucifixion Resurrection. As far as an outline, what I'd like to share with you this evening is to give you a little bit of the information about some of the philosophical information that undergirds my work. And then I was just going to share a little bit of information about the symbolic scape that I tried to create for the various images that you see before you that were dedicated to the 9 people slain at Mother Emanuel Church in 2015. Undergirding my work comes out of the New Orleans tradition, of course, the funeral tradition of the dirge and the second line. And if we were to encapsulate that and push that down and look at it through a simpler lens in terms of what the second line and what the dirge basically means, I look at that idea not from a point of death and that the body is going off into the afterlife. I look at it from the concept that the dirge begins to represent those things that we must deal with as a people, those everyday things that we must confront. And the dirge represents those things that we must collectively go through in order to receive a conceptual second line. And it's the idea that we don't have to wait till we die in order to receive it, that I believe that we can receive it while we're alive. And so that kind of idea is embedded within my work that I've been utilizing in terms of dealing with these different issues that come before us and not looking at it from a point of negative or just keeping it in that place. But how can we take that concept of the negative and transform it into one that is positive, that is affirming, that is about renewal? And so what I basically did, if we were to peer into the walls of Mother Emanuel Church, you'll note that there's some historical stained glass windows all in the interior of that structure. And I use the basic structure of the stained glass windows that come directly from the Mother Emanuel Church as the structure to build each canvas. Each canvas is 2 feet wide by 12 feet tall. If you'll note that each one of the characters that are on the canvases have a halo about their head. And a halo is to symbolize that person being translated from being a regular human being upon this earth and being translated into sainthood. The other elements that are recurring through there is some information coming from a book written by Raymond Dobart and Jacqueline Tobin called Hidden in Plain View. And in that book, they postulated that slaves and abolitionists conspired together and they used a secret code system in terms of the quilts, and they helped them to navigate the south to the north. So if you look at the images, you'll begin to find those quilt patterns conspicuously placed within the images to basically speak of that kind of movement or that transference. In the bottom of this particular panel, which is a representation for Sharonda, I have the checkerboard pattern, which is a symbol of the crossroads. And this one, you'll note there's a red and white pattern that's kind of hard to see depending on your angle in the room. It is called the flock of birds. This one is called the hourglass, the monkey wrench. And this particular one, it has this idea of the Trinity, which is in the loaves, and the chalice, which represents Christ's blood. The window also does as a host or as a means of libation unto Christ. The keyhole within the hand at the top represents Christ's sacrifice, and that's why the hand is red, which symbolizes his blood, and that his sacrifice was the key that unlocked our salvation. And this one here, it has, again, the woman sits atop the house structure, which is embedded on top of the word. The word represents the spiritual word in terms of the Bible, but also the words that are embedded within the library and those kind of things in terms of learning. As she sits there, hands up raised, as she teaches in the spiritual context, but she also teaches in the library space to the kids and to the youth. The mother with her hands over across of her heart, representing the crossroads, but she has the children in 4 different postures. One hand is going down as a symbol of that she's given themselves unto God. One hand is going up as a symbol of surrender. One hand is lifted up as a symbol of power. One hand is lifted up as a libation unto God. And I also utilize some images or imagery that come out of their Jinkra symbols, and that one represents Aya, which represents endurance. And I placed that one specifically on the body of Susie, who was the oldest member who was slain that day. Susie was 87 years old. And I could not help but think of my mother, who today would have been her birthday. And when I see this image and representation, I'm reflecting upon the mother and so many of our mothers that are out there that may still be here, that may have gone, that have passed, and in this context, that prematurely passed. So when doing this, it was very deep and personal to me. And the last one here, this one is for Tawanza, who was the youngest member who was killed, was 26 years old. And I could not help but think that in the age I am now, 49 years old, that very easily could have been my son. And he died putting himself before her and tried his best to protect her when the man pulled out his gun. And so in each image, again, is not focused, again, like I said, it's not focused on the negative. It is focused on the positive. So I will let you know what each person is. The first one is Sharonda. The second one is Daniel. The third one is Ethel. The fourth one is Clementa Pinckney, who is a pastor. Next one is Myra. Then Cynthia, Depine, Susie, and Tawanza. And at the base of each one of them, I created a more representational image of them, whereas I created a more stylized representation stemming up from them, because I would love to think about their lives not as an ending, but as a beginning, as their bodies are placed in the ground as a seed. Thank you. Peace be with you.
Thank you, Hannibal. That was the appetizer, so if you come out tomorrow, you're going to get the full course. You could see what you'll be in for. I want to thank the Amistad Center for inviting me to participate in this program. I've been involved with Amistad almost as long as they have been in New Orleans, participating in a number of programs, but this was certainly very different from some of the other programs I have been involved in. Crucifixion and Resurrection. Crucifixion was an old form of punishment, a form of execution, practiced by the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Persians, and of course we know the Romans because of the crucifixion of Christ. It could be time-consuming. The victim didn't die immediately, but suffered from asphyxiation and eventually, sometimes as many as 3 or 4 days before the person succumbed. But I want to talk about it in a different sense, sort of as a life and death cycle, the panel that we have today. To be reborn, of course, you have to have lived and you have to have died. And whether we're speaking symbolically or speaking figuratively, death, we know, is a part of life. Death is the other part of life. And of course, and if you're reborn, that's an even more important part of life. It often, you could think of the cycle of life, death, and resurrection, either for an individual or for a group, it easily was a major defeat, or what seemed to have been a major defeat, but to be followed by a very, very important victory. And so most people, but particularly African Americans, can relate to this cycle of life and death. And while preparing a few remarks, I thought about Frederick Douglass, the great American patriarch, his reaction to the Dred Scott decision in 1857. That was one of the worst decisions ever rendered by the Supreme Court. When the United States Supreme Court ruled that no black person, free or unfree, was or could ever be a citizen of the United States, that blacks only had whatever rights they were accorded by whites. Now that was very, very important because it was in 1857, and there were a lot of abolitionists, blacks and whites, who had fought to end slavery, and they saw it as a major defeat. And some of them wanted to fold their hands and to pull up their tents because the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, had spoken. But against that was Frederick Douglass, who said, I am not at all discouraged by this decision. So this is a bad decision. It is so bad that it's going to open the eyes of people to understand what slavery is all about. And I used to tell my students when I thought about that, what could have made him so optimistic? Was he merely whistling in the dark? Could he have known that within 10 years slavery was going to be over? And 10 years later, black men would be voting and would be holding offices? Did he know something that we did not know? So I'm saying sometimes the darkness comes before dawn. Sometimes the darkness is followed by more darkness. But tonight we want to talk a little bit about this rebirth, crucifixion. Sometimes crucifixion for the hopes and dreams of an individual, crucifixion of the hopes and dreams of a people. But I'm thinking about the early 1960s when the civil rights movement had really heated up. I got involved personally in 1960. I was arrested for the first time in 1963, which was really a pivotal time in the civil rights movement. The NAACP had adopted a slogan called "Freed but not yet free," free by 63. 1963 was the centennial anniversary of the issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation. And there were a lot of people who say, yeah, we're going to work hard to be really free by 1963. You know the story. We had the March on Washington in 1963. But it was a year of a lot of negatives. Dr. King was in jail when he wrote his letter from the Birmingham jail. He got out, got involved in the Birmingham campaign. A lot of people suffered. Little children attacked by police dogs. Little children attacked by powerful fire hoses. Medgar Evers was assassinated in 1963. President Kennedy was assassinated in 1963. But we know the story also about the bombing of the church on September 15, 1963. And I remember that. And one thing I remember about it was one of the TV correspondents speculating because the lesson for the day was the love that forgives. And I never forgot that. The love that forgives. And he speculated, he said, maybe when the bomb hit, they were going over the portion of the scripture the way Christ says to love your enemies and to pray for those who persecute you. Now, I wondered about that, and in fact, at that particular time, I wasn't thinking too much about loving my enemies. But we have with us tonight somebody who was there and who's going to share with us her experiences at that time and since. And I think that's very, very important for us to hear from one of the survivors because, you know, very often we have the tendency to memorialize or commemorate the people who died. But sometimes we forget about the survivors. I was giving a talk on Black History Month a few weeks ago, and I talked about a slave uprising where 7 slaves jumped overboard and they went to their death. And we often glorify and venerate those who died, but we forget about those who stayed. And I mentioned I am so happy that not all of my ancestors jumped overboard. If they had, how else would I be here tonight to share this little story with you? And you think also about the story about the prodigal son and the one who came to New Orleans and had a good time and lost all of his money. And he had to go back home. He was poor. And he was welcomed back home. But sometimes we forget about the brother who stayed there doing everything he was supposed to do. And so we need to memorialize people, and I'm so happy that we have the exhibit. But we want to hear from one of the people who was there, and she's going to talk with us about her story. And she is accompanied by her husband, Sister Sara Collins.
Thank you. My name is Sara Collins Rudolph. They called me the fifth little girl because I was in the ladies' lounge with my sister when the bomb went off. I remember that day so very well. That's a day that I would never forget, simply because on that Sunday was Youth Sunday. And like he mentioned, we was going to take over the duties that the adults usually do. But we didn't get a chance to celebrate Youth Sunday simply because a bomb went off on that Sunday. I remember how my sister and I and my other sister, how we walked to church that morning so very happy. And we was going to Sunday school and playing with her purse, and we walked all the way laughing, just having a good time, not knowing that this would be the last time that we would enjoy Addie's company. So when we arrived that morning, my sister Janie went to her class upstairs, and our class was down in the basement. So Addie and I, we decided not to go to our class because we didn't like our teacher. So we stayed in the ladies' lounge and we waited until our class turned out. So while I was in the ladies' lounge, I started looking out the door, just looking and just waiting for our class to turn out. So all of a sudden, that's when I seen Denise McNair, Cynthia Wesley, and Carol Robertson. They came into the ladies' lounge and went on the other side where the stalls was. So when they came out, that's when Denise walked over to Addie. She was standing by the couch. And she walked over and turned around and asked Addie to tie the sash on her dress. And when Addie reached her hand out to tie it, I was standing across from them at the sink, and we was watching her getting ready to tie it. So all of a sudden, heard a loud noise. Boom! The bomb went off. And we didn't get a chance to even see her tied because I was blinded from the debris, simply because they were standing by the couch in front of the window. The window was behind them, at least. So debris came in, and all I could do was say, Jesus! It scared me so bad, that loud noise. The noise was so loud. My husband had told me that they heard it at their church, and their church was on the south side, and our church was on the north side. That's how loud it was. But anyway, one of the deacons mentioned it to me after I seen him one day. I met him later on at the library, and he was telling me about it. He asked me, he said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "No." He said, "I'm the one that came in and bought you at the church. And he explained to me how when the adults upstairs heard the loud sound, he was wondering what had happened downstairs. So he came down. He was going to come down the steps, but when he looked out, the bomb had blew the stairs away. So he jumped down, and when he jumped down, he looked inside, and he just seen me standing there. And I was bleeding, he said, but he picked me up and carried me and put me in the ambulance, because they was outside waiting already. But anyway, I didn't know what had happened to the other girls. So when I arrived at the hospital, my sister Janie came in. So I asked her, they told me that I would have to lay on the cot because the eye doctor went in to examine me. So as I laid on the cot, Janie came in and I asked her, I said, "Where's Addie?" And she said Addie had hurt her back, but she was going to come to visit me tomorrow. So I said, okay. But when they operated on my eyes and I came out of recovery, I went upstairs, my mother was there, and that's when I found out what had happened. All of the girls that was in the ladies' lounge was killed, and I was the only survivor. But so I stayed in the hospital for about a couple of months, but while I was there, the doctor took the patches off my eye. He said, "What do you see out of your left eye?" And I said, "I just see a little light." And he said, "What do you see out of your right eye?" I said, I said, "I can't see anything," so I was blinded in my right eye from the bomb. But anyway, when it was time for me to be released from the hospital, the doctor told my mother to bring me back in February because they was going to have to remove my right eye. If they didn't remove my right eye, I would go blind in my left eye. And so I had to leave school, and I was already in a bad condition. You know, back then, they didn't counsel us, They didn't do anything for me. So I was really in a bad condition and afraid that what would I look like with one eye? They didn't explain it to me, but they operated on my eye and removed it, so I have a prosthetic now. So all that time while I was growing up, and I just didn't understand why would they put a bomb in the church and kill 4 innocent girls, because all of the girls that was killed that day, they was beautiful and sweet young girls, never did any harm to no one. So I just didn't understand why. I just kept asking why. I cried all the time. I never could just get over that. But I went on to school, went on through elementary school, and graduated from elementary school. And I was glad it was time to go to high school because I said I didn't want the kids to know that I was in a bombing. I thought I wanted to just keep it to myself. But me and my husband, we graduated together, and I asked him later on, did the children know that I was in a bomb? And he said, everybody did. So I thought that I was getting away with that, but people wouldn't talk about that bomb. Nobody would mention it. I guess it was a thing that, many bombs was going off in the city of Birmingham, and they began to call Birmingham, because of the explosion. Our city was known, Birmingham, Alabama was known as the Magic City, and they began to call it the tragic city because of all the violence that was going on during that time. But I never could just understand why it was so much hate. It was so much hate when we wanted to get the freedom that the white people had. We wanted the freedom to do the thing that they did, but they hate us for no reason at all. But anyway, after I finished high school, they asked me was I going to college, and I told them no. I said, I'm not going to college because I just just could make it through high school. And I began to go through life in a bad condition. I was still fearful. I had post-traumatic stress, didn't really know what it was, by me being as young as I was. Because, like I say, no one helped me. So I had to go through that, and I started drinking. And I started smoking marijuana, trying to medicate myself because that noise I would still hear, that loud sound. When I would hear a loud sound, I would just jump out, just all over. But all that didn't help me. Nothing helped me until I went to church one night, and this preacher was preaching about getting saved, sanctified, getting filled with the Holy Ghost. And he just was preaching so good that night. And how God would save sinners. And I know I had did a lot of sinning, and I wanted to get saved. So anyway, when he said, if you want to get baptized and get saved and be covered with the blood of Jesus, he said, ladies, go to your right, and men go to your left. So I ran so fast, I left my shoes at my seat because I was really ready for a change. So I went on and I got baptized that night. And when I came out of the water, I still felt, like I still had that problem. So he said, do anybody want to join the church? So I went on and joined, and because it was my sister's church, and we liked to be together at that time. And I joined, and I remember he was a prophet. This man was a prophet, and God was using him. But he would call out people, and God would show him whatever's wrong with you. So I started going, and I was sitting real close to him one day, and he just seen me just sitting there. I was always just sitting like a zombie because I was really still fearful just being in church. So he came, he walked over there to me. He said, he said, come here. So I walked over, and he said, God's showing me some things about you. He said, he's showing me that you have a nervous problem. And he said, he's showing me you suffer a lot with fear. He said, but tonight is your night. And I just smiled. And he said, just hold your hands up like this. So I hold both of my hands up, and he laid his hand on me, and he began to pray. And when he prayed, I just fell on the floor. Y'all seen how they fall on the floor after? I know y'all seen certain pictures when people fall on the floor. So that's how I did. They called it you being slain in the spirit. So when I got up, and I was so happy because when I got up that Sunday, I got on the usher board. I was the devotion leader, and I went up there to sing a song in the choir with the choir, and I couldn't even carry a note. So I know then that God had healed me, and I didn't have that fear anymore. So I found out then that God is real. A lot of people say they don't believe in God, but he proved to me that night that he is real, and he's still real in my life. So I just want to say, when you tried everything and everything failed, try Jesus. Thank you.
Now, sitting next to her is her husband, who obviously has been a pillar of strength. I asked him to say a few words because he was not in that particular church, but he was in the vicinity.
Yeah.
And he can talk about how that incident affected him. Brother Rudolph.
Yeah, it affected me. Like my wife said, you know, we finished high school together in '69. And I couldn't understand why, you know, someone would be that hateful, you know, to put a bomb in a church, kill 4 innocent people. And because like I tell Sara, I said, baby, you went through Vietnam at 12 years old. She went through an explosion at 12. And I consider that Vietnam, because that's what happened over there, you know. But I'm thankful to the Lord that he saved her, and he saved her for a reason. And that reason is to tell that story, what happened. And so I'm thankful for that, you know, that God saved my wife. And we on this journey about, you know, spreading love, because love is greater than hate. And my wife had to forgive those guys. She forgave them for what they did. And because she couldn't hold that in her, because see, when you have that hate built up in you, it does something to you. It makes you sick. You just irritable, you know, when you hating someone. So my wife, she let all that go, and she forgave them guys. And one of them still, and all the rest of them died except for one. And he's locked up in prison in Alabama. He came up for parole 2 years ago, and we had to go down there because they wanted the families to come there and say some words. And my wife told the people that she forgave him, and you know, he wasn't there because the inmate they don't come to the hearing. But the families are the one that was affected in that bombing. They was there, and so Sara told the pound that she forgave him. And that's powerful. And I told Sara, I said, Sara, I'm going to write this guy on your behalf. I just want to see. And I wrote on her behalf, my wife's behalf, and I wasn't expecting him to write back. Man, I got 2 letters from him. The first letter said that he called you sister.
Sister Sara.
Yeah, Clam. He called my wife Sister Sara and gonna say, I didn't have nothing to do with this. He trying to lay the blame on someone else, but you know, those clans, you know, they are secretive people. They very secret. They don't discuss, but I believe he did it. And they knew back then in '63 who put that bomb. J. Edgar Hoover knew, but back in that time, you know, you kill a black person, you get a pat on the back, throw a party for you. You know, our lives didn't mean anything, but my wife is a strong lady, and I thank God for her and what all she had went through, but God saved her. He saved her for a reason. Oh yeah, it took them 39 years for them guys to come to trial. So that means they was out there enjoying their life and not worried about, you know, what happened to those girls, because in the trial they came up, you know, they had secret recordings of them talking, discussing how they did this. All that came out in the trial. My wife had to beat up. I'm right there with them, listen to all this. I said, God, dog, how they... It kind of made me angry. You know, I wanted to just jump across there and do something to him. That made me angry. You put a bomb in a church, you would think you'd be saved, but back in the '60s, that was not the case. You know, that was not the case. So, but we're thankful that she made it through, and she go around the world telling her story about love is greater than hate. You can't hate no one. We all got to love one another. We can't hold no hatred in our heart for no one. No one. God love us all. And we must learn how to love one another. We got to love one another. That's what the world is lacking, love. We need more love, not no hate. Thank you.
Thank you. Has Birmingham changed much since 1963?
Yes, it's changed a lot. You know, like my husband explained to them what they wear now. They was wearing that.
Oh yeah, they wear, the Klan still exists. They ain't going nowhere. They wear suits now. They might not wear a sheet and white, but they wear suits. So, but they low key what they call a certain part of Alabama, suburb of Alabama. You know, they found some leaflets on it. They did it early in the morning or late at night. They left their leaflets, wanting people to join up with them, but they still in Alabama, so, you know, so it's just one of those things. You know, I hope they find love, and, you know, because what they're talking about is not going to work. Like I say, me and my wife, we don't hate nobody. We got to love. And that's what one thing the world is lacking is more love.
Well, you or any of the girls involved in the marches that had taken place earlier that year?
That year, I wasn't involved in it, but after I, got older, my mother used to take us to march. We marched with Fred Shuttlesworth.
Okay.
We would go and get the signs, and we would walk to the courthouse and pray on the courthouse, and several places we will go to the fire department and picket there, and we would picket the supermarket, Kroger's, because they wouldn't have black cashiers, so we had to march there.
So even though you were afraid, it didn't stop you from getting involved in making things better?
Right. I know I was with my mother then, so she didn't play, so.
Okay. I have some more questions, but we're going to open it up to the audience. Yes.
My name is Dorothy Simmons. I was involved in the civil rights movement. When you say that when you were brought out and you were still alive, you say, I know there's a God. Well, I can testify to that. I was a freedom rider in 1961, and we were beaten in Macomb, Mississippi. And after they beat us inside the terminal and kicked us out of the terminal and chased us, I was following behind Jerome Smith, who first of all, took the most severe beating, and he suffered from it today.
Yes, ma'am.
And we were running, being chased by the nice citizens of Macomb, Mississippi, and there was a truck that passed that was driven by a black man, and Jerome dove into the back of that truck. And I say, what am I going to do? I looked around. Thomas Valentine was trying to get into a taxi cab, and they pulled him out and kicked him in the body part in the head. I don't know what happened to Alice and George. And I was chased around the corner of the bus terminal. And when we got to Macomb, we didn't see one black person. But when I rounded that corner, there was a group of black people, and they just encircled me. And I say, if I never thought there was a God, I believe now.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
I know.
And another thing I want to ask you, when you spoke about hearing explosion and loud noise, you would jump. And do you have what do you call it, flashbacks now?
Yes, I still have that whenever I still hear a loud sound, and it just send me back to that time. Yeah, oh yes, I still have that jumping, you know. That's something I would look like I would never get over. I'm still praying about it though. But every time I hear a loud sound, thunder, if I hear that, I'm jumping. Just, it was really bad back there then, because we had those cars used to backfire, and every time I would hear that, it just sent me back to that vomit all the time.
Because I think all the young people and the civil rights workers back in the 60s, I think of them as soldiers. And I think, because I know now, a few people that I know cannot talk about what happened then. And I think because we got no treatment when we came back from these campaigns, that we still suffer, some more than others.
Right.
Thank you.
You're right.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Other questions? Yes.
Did you know Condoleezza Rice?
Well, when I was growing up in Birmingham, I heard about she stayed in Birmingham, but I didn't know her. I didn't know her then.
Okay, her question was whether or not she knew Condoleezza Rice, who later became Secretary of State for George Bush. I think she left and went to school outside of Birmingham.
Her father had a church there.
Right. Okay.
Denise McNair.
She knew Denise McNair, one of
That
the.
was one of her friends.
Okay.
Her father had a church there in Birmingham, and she had left early, left Birmingham. I don't know what year she left, but she left Birmingham.
Other questions? Well, I have a question. I think I'd asked a question. I don't know if I got an answer. Have things gotten better in Birmingham since?
Yes, it's much better.
It's much better?
It's much better. You know, at that time, our commissioner, Bull Connor,
Yes.
he was the one that stirred up the fire departments and the police department to do all the things that they did. But after he got out of office and later on in years, things have been much better because the police, they don't beat you with those billy clubs, and the fire department now don't put that high pressure water.
Okay.
So it's much better now.
Okay. Questions? Yes.
What about the new mayor of Birmingham?
Oh, we have a young mayor, and right now that been voted in this year. When is this year? Last year. Oh yes, and he bringing new ideas to Birmingham. He want to build things and make Birmingham better because he's young and he come from a fraternity. What fraternity is it? Alpha, yes. And he's trying to make Birmingham much better.
Okay. Yes.
I'd just like to make a comment. I just say that we as black people, we have a history of our children showing up. Children come out of the cradle and they lead the way. They did it in Birmingham. They did it in Soweto. They did it in Little Rock, Arkansas. Right? So, yeah, so I know Dr. King took a lot of criticism for allowing the children to become involved, but it was a good strategic move because he realized they didn't have to go to work, you know. They didn't have to pay any bills, so we could fill the jails. I hope that our young brothers and sisters realize that when there's a demagogue around and we want to get rid of him, we could go to Washington and we could tie up the city and we could make it ungovernable, okay? We have a history of what young brothers and sisters did in Birmingham.
Yeah. Yes, yeah.
All right. I think I saw a hand in the back. Is there a question coming from the back?
There's currently an exhibit at Xavier University Library called Children and Teenagers' Contributions to the Civil Rights Movement in Louisiana.
Right.
So that this has been a topic that's been researched by the students at Xavier University over the past 2 years. And the exhibit includes teenagers, high school students, and children's contributions to the civil rights movement in New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Bogalusa, and Shreveport. So it's currently at the Xavier University Library on either the first or the second floor of the library. Oh, the sixth floor?
Sixth floor.
No, they can't. No, they kept it up.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot of commemoration. We know what commemoration could be in the form of oral histories, written histories, can be poetry, could be in sculpture, woodcutters, and so forth. In fact, I'm sure you've already heard, those of you who came in late, Brother Steve Prince, who is a native New Orleanian by way of Detroit now, has an exhibit that is worth seeing. It's not just art for the sake of art. It tells a story that's sometimes very difficult to tell orally, because I understand what Dodie Smith was talking about. My own children say, you didn't tell us that. Sometimes I hear about some of my involvement in civil rights. Some of it is painful, but it is necessary to recall. And it gets me back to that thing about the love that forgives. And if I thought about Dr. King, the fact that he went to jail 30 times, he was beaten, didn't fight back. I mean, that's something I couldn't do. And that's why I admire him so greatly. But I think about the fact that he died, the last speech he gave was at Mason Temple in Memphis, Tennessee. Charles Mason was the founder of the Church of God in Christ. And Dr. King visited him early in his career, and he said that Bishop Mason prayed for him and told him, the Lord has a great work for you to do. And told him that he would suffer. And the last night of his life, April 3rd, when he gave that last speech, was at Mason Temple, 1968, where he reaffirmed his support for nonviolence. And I thought about that again when those, the family of the victims of those people who were slaughtered in Mother Bethel Church in Charleston, South Carolina, is telling the killer, I forgive you. I mean, it just struck me that you could say that, and obviously me, and under those circumstances, I forgive you. So this is that circle I'm talking about between death, between birth, death, and life. Dora, you had another question?
No, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to add on to what this gentleman said about children.
Yeah.
Children and young people were the backbone of the civil rights movement of the 60s. Mm-hmm. And children changed the world. And Raphael, in the beginning, you say you got involved in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. I would like to say you got involved before that, yeah, when you were still in high school. Yeah. Raphael and several black students got together, and it must have been in the 50s, because I remember
59.
My sister Dorothy, who was in your class, right, they were amongst the first students to integrate LSUNO, which is UNO now. Right. And they were still in high school at Joseph S. Clark High School. And that must have been 1957 that y'all started organizing this. Because I know you graduated 58. In 1958.
Yeah, I graduated in 59.
59, and I graduated in 60. Right. But, so you were involved as a child, mm-hmm, a young teenager, before the 1960s. Right. I just wanted to set the record straight.
I didn't want to tell them I was that old. Thank you for telling my age. Somebody else has a question? Must have.
Yeah,
yes. Okay. Oh, okay. Okay. Saying.
Okay. Good evening, and thanks to the Amistad for putting on this very important function, because as Dr. Cassimere has already alluded to, we're coming up on the 50th anniversary of Dr. King's assassination, and I'm still not in that space where I can wrap my head around the concept of forgiving someone. I understand that because retribution and revenge is very toxic on the soul. And for you, Ms. Collins, one of my good friends was from Birmingham, and he actually had gone to school with your sister, and that was Dr. Leslie Hightower, and I had just texted his sister, and she told me, yes, she does recall you and stuff. So my question is this, and I've asked this of Ms. Diane Nash, and if you had an opportunity, excluding your family, what person in history would you have liked to or would love to have met?
I would love to have met King. You know, I sang him, but I never did get a chance to meet him. He would have the meetings. I remember one Easter Sunday, he was standing on the top of the steps of the 16th Street Baptist Church, and we was fixing to go downstairs and look at a movie, The Ten Commandments. And I remember him seeing him far off, calling the people to come on in upstairs and come to the mass meeting. And I wish so much that I had met him then. And also, he also came to my mother's house when they was getting my sister ready for funeral. And my brother told me he gave him a lot of advice. See, when that happened to my sister, my brother was real angry. So he had this little knife, and he said he was finna go out there and kill a bunch of, he called them, you know what they call them. And King said, son, he said, don't go out there and do that. He said, because if you go out there and do that, he said, that'll make you just like them. And so he didn't do it, because he was really angry. Addie was his closest sister, because she would, like, you know how your parents put you outdoors when you bad, you know, boys. So Addie was the only one that come and open up the door, but we was too scared. And when Addie was killed, he just really went berserk. He wanted to do something. He really wanted to do something. So out of all the people, I wish I was at the hospital to really meet him, but I was still in the hospital.
Well, you must have been in the hospital for the funeral, because he eulogized the victims. I remember him quoting from Hamlet, I believe, princes, as he called them. But it's interesting that you said, because the reason that he went back to Memphis in 1968 was because the rioting that had taken place when he was gone. And he was saying he had to go back to prove that nonviolence still worked. That if you try to defeat the devil with his works, with his weapons, you're going to lose. And that's why I mentioned, I agree with you, he's somebody who I have so much admiration for. I think I saw a hand in the back. Yes. Can we pass the mic?
Good evening, and thank you for being here. My name is Janice Eatman. I'm from Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio.
Welcome.
And longtime Tulane Center for Public Service and Amistad Research Center service partner. I bring my students down here all the time. But I'm also the daughter and the granddaughter of Birmingham people. My mother and my maternal grandmother were both born there. And I just wanted to ask you, we know that the movement many times was centered in the church.
Yes.
And we know that the Voting Rights Act was just gutted in Shelby County of Alabama.
Right.
So what should we as church people, and I'm a church person, be doing now to continue to move the work forward and using the church as a base?
Well, you answer your prayers by getting out there doing something. It's something that people keep wondering about. I say one of the things that we have to learn, I'm talking about leaders in the black community, is how to speak the truth to power. And see, I'm not talking about white people. I'm talking about speaking the truth to power. Black people who don't vote. Black people who don't vote. It still counts when you vote. If you don't vote, your vote doesn't count. So you have to not only tell people it's important to register, it's important to vote. We should not get tired voting 4 or 5 times a week. We have to get that over. It's still very, very important. Not only is it important, we need to remind people how very precious a price has been paid for people to have the right to vote. Somebody doesn't want you to vote. And they're putting up all kind of obstacles in our path to keep us from voting. So the church is important. Keep praying, but there were people who not only prayed, but they also answered their prayers about following Dr. King, following the people involved. And I think that's one of the things that we can do. The other thing I want to ask, and I know it's getting late and we want to cut off because we want to have a little reception. But the one thing that we often do, we celebrate Black History Month, we commemorate Black heroes and Black heroines, and then we kind of forget until it's time again. We have to stay involved, not just get involved, we have to stay involved. It's important to be involved all the time. Every election is important. The presidential election is important, but the people who live here, who make decisions locally, are the people that we need to hold accountable. These are people who we need to be involved with. Yes, one more question, and then we're going to have the officials from Amistad who were gracious enough to invite us here to wrap it up for us.
I want to thank, is my mic on? I want to thank you both for coming, and I would like to speak to your husband after a little bit about Vietnam. I see his jacket on there. I was a reporter in Vietnam. But anyway, my name is Mary Frances Berry. I was once chair of the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. And I'm here in New Orleans, and next week, I think it's on the 25th or something, you can look it up, 20th, I'm going to do a book talk for my latest book, which is called History Teaches Us to Resist. And it's about all the resistance movements I've been involved in personally. And it's going to be at Octavia Books, you can look it up. But anyway, I got up because I was listening, and there were certain points I wished to make in response to what I heard. One is, I think your story is beautiful and tragic, and I'm so happy that I was here to hear you tell it, you and your husband. But what you said about voting, it struck a nerve with me. Diane Nash and I don't know how many of you know Diane, but she is one of the most overlooked people in the history of civil rights because, one, she's a woman, and two, and the men always take credit, but also, as Coretta and I used to talk about a lot of time, how the men would always, but anyway, we were talking about the fact that voting is important, what you said about voting, but it's not just voting, it's making sure that the people you vote for do what you want. I watched the city council the other night here in this town vote for that energy, whatever it is, even though the people who voted for them didn't want them to do it, they just sort of dismissed them. There are always things in every city, in every town. You gotta not only vote, but hold people accountable, and remember that protest is an essential ingredient of politics, not just voting for any old body, and just voting. Politicians always want you to vote so you can vote for them so they can get elected, but you want them to do something. Keep that in mind. And then the last thing I'll say is, when you were talking about the children in the civil rights movement, I was reminded that my brother, my baby brother, I call him, even though he's 60 now, in Nashville, he saw Diane Nash when he was 10 years old. He was in school, and he saw, 12 I think it was, he saw Diane somewhere when they were protesting and sitting in town. And he went to school and marched all the other students out of the school down to join the protest with the teachers yelling at them, come back, don't go, don't go. They went. And my mother didn't know where he was because they got arrested, of course, and they were in jail. And he is a presiding elder, AME, in Nashville right now. And one of the things that he always wants me to tell people, and I'll tell you this and I'll sit down, is that we don't talk about the role that the AME Church, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, played in the civil rights movement. Since Martin was a Baptist, we talk, and the SCLC and all that, we talk about the Baptists. In Nashville, it was the AME Church, which was the center of the protest movement and where all the people who were involved. It was in Charleston. It was the AME Church, Mother Emanuel, not Mother Bethel, that's in Philadelphia and other places, but Mother Emanuel Church. So I just point those out to you in the name of my brother. But thank you so much, and I'm just so glad I was here tonight to hear you speak. Thank you.
Thank you. And I might add, when Dr. Berry was the chairman of the United States Commission on Civil Rights, it was a body that was worth talking about. I'm not sure that's true today. If you had come to my classes, I would have talked about the role of the AME, the oldest and the first black institution that was involved in making life better, not just in the world to come, but here today. Joanne Robinson was a woman who organized the Montgomery bus boycott, not Dr. King. Joanne Robinson was the one who organized the bus boycott. But at that particular time, people felt you had to have a male to lead it. And it did, in fact, bring Dr. King to prominence. But a little secret that many people don't know, the majority of the civil rights activists were women. The bravest of the civil rights activists were women. And I say not always the smartest, because they would do things I wouldn't think about doing. But we work together.
Today at McDonough 35, the 4 young ladies who will play the role of the scribes, who are the spiritual representation of the 4 angels killed at the church in Birmingham. We sat down today and went over their script, and Sister Sara and Brother Rudolph were gracious enough to come. So when Sister Rudolph began to tell her story, one of the angels began to weep. And when she began to weep, this energy went through my spine that said, "Well done, my son." Because without the babies, it's meaningless. So it was, it went into them, her stories, and they realized that they are history. Now is history. Each second is history. So I merely followed the orders of the everlasting and said to work on all of these levels, the visual, the sound, the music, the literature, the living witnesses. And it's really an honor and a pleasure to have endured the suffering that it took to witness this. Thank you so much.